This video is about me, Frankie, when we used to go fishing. We used to go fishing all the time with my dad. And I remember my dad bought us some fishing poles. And we used to go to this creek over by my grandpa's house out in, I think it's on Valwood. Is it Valwood? It's like far down from our old Turner. It's like near 635. 635 and like, I think 635 and Webb Chapel. It could be, yeah, I think it's either not Valwood. I think it's Webb, because if you go down Josie, I think it goes all the way to 635. But it's like Webb Chapel and 635, just around that area. But it's near my grandpa's house. And we used to go there all the time, just me and Frankie. I think Julian got to go maybe a couple of times, but he may not remember because he's too young. And we were going fishing, and I remember, I don't know if we had some old fishing poles when we went, but my dad decided to buy us some fishing poles, some brand new ones. And me and Frankie used to go to the arcade games, and my dad would take us to Sears, which used to be Valley View Mall. And my dad used to take us there. This is where 97.9 The Beat used to be, and it's no longer there. It's all been removed and bulldozed. It's just an empty lot now. But there used to be a Sears there. Was it no Sears? It was like Sears and a couple other places, and we went there. And my dad used to take us to go play arcade games. And we went to go buy some fishing poles at the mall, and we're all excited because Dad spent money to buy some fishing poles. And my dad used to sit at the bench at the center by himself, and I remember him just being like not bitter, but like angry. And I remember he'd give me and Frankie like 10-15 bucks each, and back then that was like a fortune of money. And he goes, yeah, go play some video games. So we go and get a bunch of quarters, and we go play like arcade games. And I'd go over to my dad, then I asked him for a few more dollars, and my dad would happily here's a couple more dollars. And I remember this, and he was very content to give us, because he wanted us to be, happy. And I remember every time how I went over to him, he was just thinking, and he was like angry, and he was like thinking about it, and he was just doing this. And I'd come over to him, and then I'd ask for a few dollars, and he goes, and I remember this one particular time. My father was very angry because I remember him talking about, it's like, and he was frustrated. He goes, I had to work for everything I had in my life. Nobody just came and gave me anything. And his nursing degree, that he couldn't complete, he didn't want to do this. And I remember him, I think he gave me like $5, and I just went, and I didn't ever want to ask my dad for a lot of money, because he didn't like to spend money, and he, on stupid things. Like if he didn't think he had more than enough money, he just would not buy it. And even though he had enough money, and I remember walking up to him, and he was just doing this, and he was just sitting by himself, like looking ahead, like he was just mad, like just, you don't know what the fuck I went through. And there was no reason for him to be this way. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't drinking. He was just by himself, wasn't reading the newspaper. And I went over to him, and he gave me $20. He gave me $20, and that back then $20 was like $100 on video games. That was like insane. I was like, whoa, what? But when I walked over to him to ask for some money for some video games, he looked over. He was like this, and he looked over at me, and he goes, and I knew when he felt confident, when he wanted to give me something. And he behaved real confident, and he goes like this. He goes, right? He gets his wallet, and he goes, and he hands me the money, and he's looking ahead like, here you go, son. and he's like, but he's pulling out the money out of his wallet, and he's looking ahead, and he's mad, like, here you go, son. And I remember that so distinctively, because he was happy to give me something. He goes, go and play some video games, son. And I walk in, Frankie's playing video games, and we have our fishing poles that he's taken care of, that he just bought us. And we're going to, me and Frankie are at the arcades. And there isn't a lot of people, so it was really great. There wasn't a whole lot of people, so we had like the whole arcade place kind of to ourselves. And, we had the whole place kind of to ourselves. And, sorry, my nose is, they shot some sort of electronic device and gave me a pimple, but my nose. But, I remember the way that he gave me that money, and he was mad at somebody or someone, like whatever it is, that the racism he went through throughout his life is that, here, let me give you something, son. And I remember that so distinctively. Like, I don't think there's probably ever more of a remembrance that I remember when he ever gave me money for video games, or for, like, some ice cream, or some ice cream guy. Because my dad didn't, he would not, if he didn't think he liked buying us stuff, but if he didn't think, like, if he saw something like that, a special pin that was like, $25, he would not buy it. He was not, even if it was going to make me, he wasn't going to. But he liked, he started, throughout my, I knew how he was financially. So I remember that, and I think about that. And I was thinking about that. I wanted to make a video on that, because I remember my dad, and he was mad, and he pulls out his wallet, like, here you go, son. Like, here you go, son. And he was like looking, and he did it just like that. Like, he's looking at the camera, and he's like, man. And I come over to the side, and he goes, here you go, son. Like, and mad, like, and not at, he had nothing. He was not mad. He was like, here, son, here, let me give you $5 more, son. And I came back, and and he gave me a few more dollars. And I remember him thinking, like, and he goes, go ahead and play, go ahead and here, go enjoy yourself, do what you want to do. And he was just there doing this, like, and he was mad. And the way that I understood, this is not the way that I understood, I knew what he meant. There was, what he had gone through in his life, and what all the situations, is that he was giving something to us as to something that nobody wanted to give to him, and he had to bust his ass for it, and he had what he had to go through. And he was, here, let me give you some kindness, because none of these motherfuckers are wanting to do shit in this life. Here, let me give you something. Let me give you something over here. And Frankie, I think, asked for some more money, but it wasn't frequent, because I didn't want to go ask him for money, a whole lot of money. I'd maybe go there 2-3 times. He maybe give me like $5, and then I'll maybe go over there after playing. He's like, you got a few more dollars? Yeah, and he gave me maybe $2, because we were just a couple more games. But that was it. It wasn't ever like spoiled. But I remember that particular time he gave me $20. And, there's all these things that, because they're running so much psychology shit that it's just like the stories you hear about the Holocaust. They completely erase the existence of your human existence in history, that it ever happened, so that they just get what the fuck they want. And that's what they're doing. And so I knew, that's how well I knew my father. This was, because they turned this all into, he's some old geezer that's sitting fucking in the corner. He's old as shit. He doesn't know what's going on. He's just drinking beer and just being a soldier. Yeah, that's just, it was none of that. And he was just taking, oh man, and he didn't know what was going on. And here comes Hector. Okay, son, let me give you all this money. Oh shit. It was none of that. I mean, because I used to go with him all the time to the mechanic shop, and I used to kind of be the lookout for him. And when I say the lookout, because my dad had thick Coke bottle glasses, I remember he'd be signing things, and back then it was more intense racist. I knew the difference between my race and a white person's very quickly, and then a black's. But the whites, when you could tell that they didn't like, my father, because we were colored. And I remember, my dad signing, he said, what do you need to get me to get fixed? Yeah, it's going to cost you $400 to get this fixed. $400? What are you going to do to the car? And my dad would be like, because he didn't know exactly what, because they try to explain. So, all right, and I remember looking at these guys, and they would look at my dad like he was, like they were fooling his ass. And we'd get back into the waiting room. And I would tell my dad, I said, hey, that guy was looking at you when you were signing the paper. And I would tell him. And he goes, he was? And I goes, yeah, he was looking at you. And I'd get back into the car, and he would tell me, he goes, thank you, son. You're good job, son. And he would tell me things like that. And they really turned this into, he was just some old geezer, just doesn't know what he's going. He's disoriented. He's just deteriorated. He was very brilliant at his age, at that time when I was young. I mean, there wasn't anything. This is like I was probably at that time around 7 to 8 years old. I mean, you could take him to Mexico and give him a map, and he knew how to get there and back easily, in a terrain where things haven't even been mapped out very well. This is before cell phones, pay phones, any of that stuff, But I thought I'd make a video on that. I remember that. I remember him just thinking, because he was mad, and how he sort of how he expressed that so vividly to me. And we went there several times, and he'd be like this, and he'd pull out his wallet. He goes, and the way that he handed it to me, like I knew how he handed something to me when he handed it to me. I knew how he handed it to me, like whether it was gentle or it was like, here, I want to give you something. I want to give you some money. I want to give you some money. And like I knew it. I knew, and I remember, him doing that, and he'd look and he'd be like, and he'd look at me for a moment, and he'd be like, here you go. And just like frustrated because it wasn't. I don't know what the story was, but I knew what it meant. I knew 100% what it meant. Anyway, I thought I'd make a video on that, which wasn't very often. He didn't go out and spend money. Other video games, sometimes you just like to splurge and go buy a Game Boy over at Toys R Us, or buy me a brand new bicycle, but I thought I'd share a video, huh?